They said she didn't belong. That morning, under the blazing sun, Bola pressed her small body against the peeling wall of a classroom, clutching a handful of dirty papers she had scavenged from the garbage the night before. The papers were crumpled, stained, and smelt faintly of kerosene, but to her they were treasure. Inside the class, a teacher's chalk scraped loudly against the board. "Fractions," he said, his voice echoing through the open window. 1/2, 1/3. Bola's eyes widened. She pressed her ear closer to the wall, lips moving silently as she copied the words with a stub of pencil. A pencil so short she had to pinch it carefully to avoid cutting her fingers. Sweat ran down her forehead, but she ignored it. The world outside was noise. Her world was the chalkboard she could not see. Then it happened. "Teacher," a boy shouted from inside. "She's there again. The mad woman's daughter." The classroom erupted with laughter. Small fists pounded on desks. Some children leaned out the window just to get a better look at her. Bola froze. Her heart pounded against her ribs. But she didn't run. Not yet. Not when she hadn't finished writing what the teacher had said. The teacher's face appeared at the window. "You again?" Her voice was sharp, angry. "How many times have I warned you? Leave this place." Bola gripped her papers tighter, whispering under her breath, "Just one more line, please." But the teacher had already grabbed a stick. She banged it against the wall. The sound cracked through Bola's bones. The laughter grew louder. Then, as if humiliation wasn't enough, a boy spat through the window. The spit landed on her arm, mixing with the sweat on her skin. Something broke inside her, but she still didn't cry. She just gathered her papers, held them against her chest, and ran. Her bare feet slapped the dusty ground as the children's laughter followed her down the street like a curse. But even as she ran, she kept glancing at the shaky handwriting she had managed to copy down. Fractions. Denominators. Numerators. Because to Bola, those little scraps of knowledge were worth every insult. Every slap. Every spit. She was the daughter of a mad woman. She had no father. She had no home. No protector. No sponsor. Only hunger. Only shame. Only rejection. But in her heart burned a single stubborn fire, the desire to learn. And as she ran that morning, clutching her dirty papers with tears threatening to spill, Bola didn't stop running until she reached the bend by the abandoned kiosk where no one could see her. Her chest heaved as she bent forward, clutching her papers. Dust clung to her legs and sweat mixed with the spit that had landed on her arm. She wiped it off roughly, her lips trembling. The laughter still rang in her ears. It was always the laughter. Children her age, children younger than her. They sat behind desks, wearing clean uniforms, while she crouched in dirt like a thief. They had textbooks, sharpened pencils, bags filled with notebooks. She had only scraps, a broken pencil, and the burning shame of being the mad woman's child. Slowly, she lowered herself to the ground and spread the papers on her lap. Her handwriting was uneven, shaky from rushing, but she read it anyway. 1/2. Her lips moved silently as she traced the numbers with her finger. A small smile crept onto her face. Even today, despite the spit, despite the laughter, she had learned something. A gust of hot wind blew past, carrying dust with it. One of the papers slipped from her lap. Bola quickly chased it, pressing it back into the bundle like it was gold. Because to her it was. Those scraps were the proof that she wasn't as useless as the world said. She hugged them tightly to her chest and whispered, "One day, I'll stand in front of a class too. They will call my name." But the words tasted bitter on her tongue. Because she knew, tomorrow she would still have to sneak behind another classroom. Tomorrow someone would still laugh. Someone would still spit. Someone would still call her Omo Worry. Her feet ached as she began to walk back towards the roadside, where her mother usually sat. In her mind, she pictured the faces of the children laughing, the teacher's stick slamming against the wall, the spit rolling down her arm. Shame burned her cheeks again. Yet beneath that shame something else grew. A hunger. A determination. No matter how many times they chased her, she would come back. No matter how many times they insulted her, she would listen from the walls. No matter how many times she left in tears, she would return with her scraps of knowledge. Because Bola had nothing else in the world. Nothing but her mother. And the dream of being seen. That was her life. A cycle of rejection and resistance. But life, cruel as it had been to her, was about to twist in a way Bola never imagined. Because soon, she would meet someone who would change everything. From the very beginning, Bola's life was loud. Not the good kind of loud. Not music, not laughter, not the rhythm of Lagos that people celebrate. Her own loudness came from the screams of her mother. Her mother was mad. Not the kind of madness people whisper about, but the kind that left no hiding place. She would laugh in the middle of the road, roll in the dust, shout at strangers who never did anything to her. Some days she stripped off her clothes and ran through the street, cursing the sky, and the whole neighborhood gathered to watch. That was the childhood she knew. Shame was her first companion. The other children had mothers who combed their hair, packed them food, shouted at them for being late to school. She had a mother who tore her own clothes and sang to ghosts only she could see. They lived by the roadside in Mushin, close to a gutter that never stopped smelling. The place wasn't a house, it was just a zinc shack patched with nylon and broken plywood. Rain poured in through holes in the roof. At night she could hear rats running across the floor. That was her bed, a mat in the corner close enough to smell the urine that leaked into the soil outside. She didn't know her father. People told different stories. Some said he ran away the day he realized the mother was mad. Some said he was already dead before she was even born. Others swore he was somewhere in Lagos, pretending he didn't have a child. She stopped asking because every answer felt like a lie. What she couldn't ignore was how the street treated her. The name-calling never ended. Pekin of a mad woman. See her hair, she'd be just like her mama. They spat at her. Sometimes even grown women chased her away when she tried to sit near their children. The burn never left. It was the kind that stayed under her skin, like a scar nobody else could see. She grew up in survival mode. Hunger was constant. Some days she begged for food, but she never steal, and when she couldn't get anything, the girl went to bed with an empty stomach, listening to her mother laugh in the dark like madness was a lullaby. But even in all of that, Lagos had a way of teaching her sharpness. By the time she was 7, she already knew how to dodge insults, how to fight back with words sharper than blades, how to slip through the crowd in Oshodi without being noticed. And yet, she was still just a child forced to carry shame on her back like it was her birthright. By the time she was 12, she already knew what shame tasted like. It was bitter, like dust on an empty stomach. Lagos did not allow children to stay children for long. Her mother had become a familiar sight on the roadside, a mad woman who laughed at invisible people, cursed strangers, and sometimes danced half-naked when the heat was unbearable. Passers-by threw stones at her. Okada riders mocked her. Market women hissed whenever she came close, clutching their tomatoes as if madness could steal too. But to the girl, that was Mama. She never knew another version. They lived under a broken kiosk at the edge of a bus stop. By day, danfos screeched and conductors shouted. By night, the road dimmed, but the smell of roasted corn, sweat, and gutter never left. The kiosk was not a home, it was just wood and zinc leaning on each other, a place to hide when the rain started. At 12, she was already the caretaker. Her mother did not know left from right, but the girl knew when to beg, when to run errands, when to fetch pure water bags for people and earn 5 naira. She tied pieces of nylon together to cover holes in their roof. She'll pick half-rotten mangoes from the market floor and wash them like treasure. School was a dream she could not even name. Instead, she sat at the roadside and watched other children in uniforms march past her every morning. White shirts. Green pinafores. Laughter that carried no weight. She stared until they disappeared, then faced her mother, wild hair, ragged wrapper, empty eyes. Sometimes, her mother would remember her. On good days, she called her by name and sang old lullabies that made the girl feel almost normal. On bad days, she screamed at her, slapped her, chased her into the street, calling her a witch. The girl cried silently those nights, pressing her face into her skinny arms. Nobody came to her defense. Nobody wanted a madwoman's child. Still, she learned things Lagos children in proper homes never learned. She knew which junction sellers were kind enough to dash her leftover bread, which gutter rats never slept, which policeman at the checkpoint would take pity and throw her 10 naira when he was drunk. She knew how to disappear when fights broke out in the market. Her name was Mama Chidinma. Everyone on the street knew her, the woman who sold steaming hot beans and fried plantain by the roadside, just before the junction where the yellow buses screamed for passengers. She wasn't rich, but she had a soft heart, the kind that noticed children others stepped over. Bola was 12 then. Thin, restless, and always watching other children with a quiet ache. Most days she would sit on a broken block near Mama Chidinma's stall, not begging, not talking, just inhaling the smell of beans, stew, and fried plantain until her stomach cramped. One evening Mama Chidinma called out, "Small girl, come here." Bola froze. Nobody ever called her like that unless they wanted to chase her away. "Take this," the woman said, pushing a small plate into her hands. A scoop of beans. 2 slices of plantain. Bola stared. Her throat tightened and for a moment she didn't know if she should eat or run. Eat it. I don't want money, Mama Chidinma smiled softly, wiping sweat from her forehead. That night, for the first time in months, Bola slept with food in her belly. Days turned into weeks. Mama Chidinma noticed the girl kept coming back, not to beg but just to be close. She began giving her food more often. Soon she bought Bola a second-hand school uniform from the market at Katangwa, slightly torn at the sleeve but neatly washed. The next Monday, Bola walked into Ajigunal Community Primary School with trembling legs and the uniform hanging loosely on her thin body. Her classmates laughed at the oversized dress but the teachers did not. Within days they realized the strange roadside girl was brilliant. She could read faster than most. She solved sums quickly. She listened with a hunger nobody could ignore. By the end of the first term, every teacher praised her. Some even said if she had someone to sponsor her, Bola could become somebody big. In return for Mama Chidinma's kindness, Bola washed plates at her stall, swept the floor and carried heavy buckets of water from the well. She did it gladly. That small stall became her second home. For the first time in her short life, Bola felt the fragile beginnings of belonging. But hope is a cruel thing when it isn't allowed to last. One Friday at the end of the school term, Mama Chidinma packed her pots earlier than usual. Her face looked heavy. She called Bola aside. I have to travel, she said quietly. Abuja. My brother got me a shop there. I'll be leaving tomorrow. Bola's smile froze. You're coming back after? Mama Chidinma hesitated, touched Bola's head and whispered, God will take care of you. And then she left. The following Monday, Bola walked to school in her faded uniform, waiting to hear Mama Chidinma's voice at the roadside stall. The stall was gone. She was sent out of class the same week. No one had paid her fees. Still Bola kept waiting. Every afternoon she returned to that empty space by the roadside, staring at the patch of bare ground where the food stall used to stand. Weeks passed. She believed, foolishly, desperately, that Mama Chidinma would come back for her. But she never did. Bola learned something that month. Sometimes kindness doesn't last. And when it leaves, the hole it creates is bigger than hunger itself. At first, Bola thought Mama Chidinma would come back. She waited at the stall every afternoon after school closed, sweeping the dusty ground and arranging the empty benches just like before. Days turned into weeks. The warmth of someone calling her my daughter. All of it vanished like smoke. One evening, the other women in the market whispered the truth. Mama Rizakat don go Abuja. She don carry her children follow body. The words hit Bola like a stone. Her hands trembled. Abuja was another world, far away, unreachable. The next Monday she still put on her torn uniform and walked to the public school. She slipped quietly into the class, head bent low, hoping no one would notice. But it didn't take long. At break time, a teacher called her out and led her straight to the headmistress's office. The headmistress, a tall woman with sharp glasses, looked down at her over the rim. Where is your guardian? Where is the person that paid your fees? Bola stammered, her small voice shaking. Mama Rizakat, she travel, but she will come back. Please, I will be number one in class, I promise. Don't send me away. The headmistress sighed, shaking her head. This is not about brilliance, child. Rules are rules. If there is no one to pay, you cannot stay here. Bola dropped to her knees on the dusty floor of the office, tears running down her face. Please, Ma, let me stay. I will clean the toilets, I will sweep the compound, just let me learn. But the headmistress's voice turned stern. Stand up and leave. Until your guardian returns, don't come back to this school. The words slammed into her chest. Bola picked up her old bag, the one Mama Rizakat bought from second-hand market, and walked out slowly. The laughter of children echoed behind her, each sound like a knife cutting into her. By the time she reached the gate, her tears had dried, leaving only the heavy silence of defeat. She was back on the streets. Back to square one. Bola's hunger for knowledge did not die when the gates of the public school closed against her. If anything, it grew stronger. She had tasted what it felt like to sit in a classroom, to hold a pencil, to copy letters on a page, to hear her name praised by teachers. That little light refused to go out. So she began to wander. Every morning, while other children with pressed uniforms and polished shoes hurried into their schools, Bola followed from a distance. She stood at the gates, watching them, her bare feet dusty, her dress torn. She longed to join them, but the security men always barked at her. Still she refused to give up. At one school, she climbed a mango tree near the fence, pressing herself against the branches as quietly as she could. From up there she could see into the classroom through the open window. She repeated every word the teacher said, whispering to herself as if she too was part of the lesson. But the children noticed her. They pointed, they laughed, some even threw pebbles. Soon a teacher came out with a stick and shouted at her to leave. She scrambled down the tree and ran until her chest burned. On other days she crept close to the windows of classrooms. She knelt in the dust, her chin resting on the sill, eyes wide open as she tried to catch every sentence. Sometimes she would cup her hands behind her ears just to hear better. The pupils inside laughed at her. "Why is this girl always here?" they mocked. "She is dirty. She doesn't belong." Teachers too grew angry. "Go home," one snapped. "You are disturbing my class." Another threatened to call the police if she ever came near again. But Bola had no home to return to, not the kind they meant. She carried her pain quietly. She knew she didn't belong, but she also knew her mind was as sharp as theirs. She only needed a chance. Night after night, she traced letters in the sand outside the wooden shack where she slept, remembering everything she had overheard. In her heart she whispered, one day I will not just peep through windows. I will sit inside again." Bola did not give up. After being chased from one school, she wiped her tears with the back of her hand and looked around the city for another place to try her luck. She had already discovered something about herself. Her hunger for learning was stronger than the hunger in her stomach. One afternoon, after giving her mother some water and leaving her in the small corner by the broken wall they now called home, Bola walked further into a different part of Lagos. The air smelled of roasted corn and smoke, and the noise of traffic was everywhere. That was when she found another school, a small public one with a rusted gate and children in blue uniforms. This time Bola was more careful. She learned the timing of the classes, watched where the teachers entered, and chose her hiding spots wisely. Instead of rushing in, she climbed trees near the classrooms, hiding among the branches where the leaves covered her small frame. Sometimes she knelt outside the dusty windows, crouching low so no one would notice her shadow. Day after day she returned. She repeated the lessons she heard, whispering them under her breath as she walked back home to her mother. She copied words on scraps of paper she found in the trash, writing with broken pencils she picked up from the ground. For one whole month, no one noticed her. The teachers thought she was just another child from the street passing by. The students did not pay attention to her small face that appeared near the windows. She blended into the background, quiet, determined, invisible. And every evening, after filling her mind with knowledge, she went back to her mother, washing her, feeding her with whatever food she could beg or gather, talking softly even though her mother's replies were only scattered murmurs. But her luck did not last forever. One morning, as the students repeated their mathematics tables, Bola's whisper grew louder in her excitement. She forgot herself and answered before the class did. The voice startled the teacher. The room went silent. Dozens of eyes turned to the window where Bola crouched. The teacher's face tightened. "Who is that?" The children burst into laughter. Within moments the teacher rushed outside and Bola tried to run, but she was too late. Her thin arms were caught and she was dragged into the classroom. "What are you doing here?" the teacher demanded. Bola's lips trembled. "I just want to learn, sir. Please. I just want to learn." But instead of compassion there was anger. The teacher saw her as a nuisance, a distraction. The children laughed even harder as she was pulled to the front of the class, scolded, and then thrown out through the gate. Her cheeks burned with shame. The laughter of the children followed her down the road. Back to square one again. Bola began to live in a rhythm only she understood. Every morning she would rise before the sun, wash her mother's face with a rag dipped in cold water, and leave a small bowl of gari beside her before quietly slipping away. By the time the other children were tying their uniforms and rushing out with lunch boxes, Bola had already found her hiding place. She would squeeze herself behind the far corner of the classroom, or press her small frame against the wall, heart beating like a drum each time a teacher's shadow moved near. Sometimes she perched on the windowsill, half hidden by the curtain, watching the blackboard as letters and numbers came alive. Other times she crouched by the doorway, knees digging into the floor, her hands clutching the wood so tightly her knuckles hurt. Yet she did not mind. Day after day she copied everything in her mind, alphabets, sums, new words. At night, as she sat beside her sleeping mother under the flickering streetlight, she whispered them back to herself like a prayer. What joy it gave her. The smallest lesson became her treasure. One simple word written on the board could stay with her all night, filling her chest with a quiet happiness she could not explain. She remembered one afternoon when the teacher explained fractions. The other children groaned, some even dozed off. But Bola's eyes lit up as though someone had handed her a secret key to the world. She could barely sit still, whispering the numbers to herself. Even hunger could not break her joy. Even insults from passers-by, calling her the daughter of a madwoman, could not erase it. She carried knowledge in her heart as though it was the only thing she truly owned. And yet, every day carried the same fear, that someone would notice her. That her secret place of joy would be taken from her too. The next time Bola chose a school, it was not the kind she usually targeted. It was not a run-down building with peeling paint, nor a place where children wore torn sandals and washed-out uniforms. This time it was a big school, the kind that had tall gates painted in bright colors, guards in neat uniforms, and children dropped off in shiny cars every morning. Bola stood across the road the first day, clutching her mother's wrapper she used as a small shawl. She stared for a long time at the gates. Inside she could hear the bell ring. The voices of children rose like a song. It sounded different here, more confident, more certain. For many days she watched before she dared to try. At last, one morning she slipped through the gate when a group of pupils entered. Nobody noticed her. Nobody asked where she came from. She wore no uniform, only her faded gown that barely reached her knees. But inside, she blended into the stream of children rushing toward their classes. That first day she did not sit. She hid behind the thick branches of a mango tree that leaned close to a classroom window. She pressed her body against the trunk, her eyes fixed on the chalkboard through the glass. The teacher's words came alive. Numbers, letters, stories, and Bola's heart danced. Day after day she returned. She learned to time her steps, to slip in unseen, to crouch beneath the windows where the curtains never quite closed. Sometimes she pressed her ear to the wall, listening so hard her whole body leaned forward. Each day she carried the lessons back with her. While fetching water for her mother, she whispered the new words under her breath. While sweeping around their tiny shelter, she recited the numbers again and again. Her joy was hidden, but it glowed inside her like fire. The bell rang in the distance, and children in bright, neatly ironed uniforms scattered across the manicured lawns of St. James International Academy. Their laughter filled the air, echoing against the tall school buildings. Bola, her dress patched and old, crept silently through a gap in the fence. Her heart raced as she tiptoed across the grass. She had done this many times, sneaking in quietly just to listen, just to feel what it meant to be part of a world that didn't belong to her. That morning she found her favorite spot, behind a wide mango tree at the edge of the playground. It had become her classroom. There, with scraps of torn paper she had rescued from bins, she copied down everything she overheard from nearby lessons. Her handwriting was small but careful, her eyes focused as though every word carried gold. But this time she wasn't alone. A shadow fell across her paper. Bola froze, clutching the scraps like treasure. Slowly she lifted her head and saw a girl standing there. Her uniform was perfect, her hair tied neatly with ribbons, but her eyes looked lonely. Everyone in the school called her Dump Linda. They whispered she wasn't bright, that her father's money paid for her grades. Linda blinked, surprised to see Bola crouched with dirty paper in her hand. But instead of shouting, she lowered herself onto the grass. "Why are you here?" Linda asked softly. Bola hesitated, then whispered, "I come to listen, to write, to learn." And then in that quiet corner, two worlds touched. Linda laughed nervously and told Bola about herself, about how she hated being called dump, how she sat through classes but never understood anything, how teachers looked at her with pity. Bola listened, nodding, and then shared her own truth. About her mother's sickness, about selling vegetables in the market, about sneaking into the school because she couldn't afford to sit in a real classroom. For the first time, Linda didn't feel stupid and Bola didn't feel invisible. They were just two girls, different lives, same longing to be seen. When Linda pulled out her lunchbox that day packed with sandwiches, fruits and juice, Bola's stomach growled. Without thinking, Linda offered her half. Bola hesitated, ashamed, but Linda insisted. And so, beneath the mango tree they ate together, giggling like old friends. Before the bell rang again, Bola took Linda's notebook and began explaining what the teacher had taught in class. She used simple words, drawings, and examples. Linda's eyes widened as understanding flickered in them for the first time. "You mean, I can learn this?" she whispered. "Of course," Bola smiled. "You're not dumb. You just needed someone to show you differently." From that day a secret friendship began. Every afternoon at lunch, Linda would rush to the mango tree with food in her bag and questions in her mind. And every afternoon Bola would be there, ready to teach, ready to share. Days turned into weeks, and the secret beneath the mango tree grew stronger. Linda no longer dreaded classes. When the teacher asked questions, she raised her hand timidly at first, then with growing confidence. The other children stared in shock. Linda, Dump Linda, was answering correctly. But no one knew her secret. No one knew that every answer she gave had first been whispered to her by a girl with patched clothes and hungry eyes. At lunch, Linda brought more food than usual, making sure Bola never went hungry. She would sneak biscuits, fruits, even chicken wings wrapped in foil, and together they ate in laughter and whispers. Sometimes Linda would complain about her classmates calling her names, and Bola would squeeze her hand and say, "They'll see. You'll show them who you are." And Linda did. The principal praised her one morning in assembly. Teachers started calling her improved, not dump. The bullies grew quiet. Linda walked taller, but in her heart she knew who had lit that fire: Bola. One afternoon, as Bola packed her scraps of paper, Linda frowned. "Why don't you just come into the school properly?" Bola shook her head quickly. "What if they see me? They'll chase me away." Linda's lips tightened. The next day she marched boldly to the gatekeeper. "This girl comes with me every day," she said, pointing to Bola. "Let her in or I'll tell my father." The guard hesitated. He knew who Linda's father was: the billionaire Mr. Richard Lawson, owner of the school itself. Fear flashed across his eyes, and from that day he let Bola slip in quietly. Their friendship blossomed even more. Bola gave Linda knowledge, and Linda gave Bola a taste of belonging. They leaned on each other like sisters, bound not by blood but by secret trust. Neither of them knew it, but their quiet bond was about to draw the attention of a man whose shadow stretched over the whole school: the billionaire father himself. The lunch bell had just rung. The school compound buzzed with noise, students rushing to the cafeteria, some hanging around in clusters, and others spreading their mats under trees. But Linda was not interested in food that day. She sat quietly beneath her favorite tree, the one that had become their spot. Her eyes kept darting toward the gate. She was waiting for Bola. She always waited for her now. Linda held 2 food packs in her lap, one for herself, one for Bola. Ever since Bola had confessed she often came to school hungry, Linda had made it her duty to save an extra portion, sometimes even pretending she wasn't hungry in the cafeteria just so she could sneak food out. It had become part of their ritual. 2 girls sitting cross-legged under the tree, eating and laughing softly, far away from the noisy cafeteria. But that afternoon, something broke the usual rhythm. The loud rumble of engines filled the air. Heads turned. A line of shiny black SUVs swept through the school gate, tires crunching against the gravel. Security men hurried to their feet, some saluting nervously, others adjusting their uniforms. The students froze in curiosity. The convoy glided to a stop in front of the main building. Doors clicked open and men in dark suits stepped out, scanning the environment. Then came the man himself. Linda's heart skipped. Her father. Mr. Richard Cole. The billionaire everyone read about in newspapers, the man who was always in foreign meetings, always flying from one country to another. A man too busy to ever appear without announcement. Yet here he was, broad-shouldered, neatly pressed suit, his face stern but commanding respect. Linda's hands trembled. She stood up slowly, food pack still clutched tightly. She hadn't been warned. Her father never visited school. He only sent drivers, assistants, or sometimes her stepmother. To see him walking across the compound in daylight was shocking. "Daddy?" she whispered under her breath, as though saying it too loud would make him vanish. Around that same moment, Bola appeared. She had just sneaked in through the back gate, smiling the way she always did when she spotted Linda waiting. Her hair was tied back neatly, her dress clean though a little faded. She was holding her stack of rough papers, scraps from dustbins she always collected, eager to write down what she overheard in classrooms. But when she saw the black cars and the tall figure of the billionaire, her steps slowed. Her smile faded. She looked at Linda, then at the man. Something inside her chest squeezed painfully. "Is he?" Bola whispered, her voice low and shaky as she finally reached Linda's side. Linda's lips parted. She nodded. "Yes, my father." Bola froze. For a moment she wished the earth could open and swallow her whole. Her fingers dug into her papers as though they could shield her from being noticed. But it was too late. Mr. Cole had already seen them. His eyes lingered on Bola, sharp and questioning, before returning to his daughter. He approached. "Linda," his deep voice carried across the compound, commanding silence even from a distance. Students stopped whispering. Teachers who had peeked out from windows quickly stepped back. Everyone knew better than to intrude. Linda swallowed, then forced a smile. "Daddy." When he reached them, his eyes didn't leave Bola. "Who is this girl?" Bola's knees weakened. She couldn't speak. The rough papers in her hands shook visibly. Linda stepped forward, her voice firmer than usual. Daddy, she's my friend. Your friend? His brows furrowed. Does she attend this school? No, she doesn't. But she should. Linda's voice cracked, but she kept her chin up. She's the one who's been helping me. She's the reason I can answer questions in class now. She teaches me what I don't understand. Mr. Cole turned to Bola fully now, his expression unreadable. Is that true? Bola's lips parted, but words refused to come. For the first time since their friendship began, she felt ashamed of her background, her tattered bag, her worn slippers, her mother's unstable mind waiting for her at home. But Linda didn't let the silence stretch. She moved closer, clutching her father's arm. Daddy, please. She's not like other people. She's special. She helps me every day even when she has nothing. You can't send her away. The billionaire studied the two girls. His jaw tightened as though fighting an inner conflict. Around them, the compound remained unnaturally quiet, all eyes watching the rare scene unfold. Finally he spoke. Come with me. Both of you. For the first time in her life, Bola didn't know whether to run or stay. Mr. Cole sat at his wide polished desk, the air-conditioned office carrying the faint scent of leather and books. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, observant. He gestured for both girls to sit in the chairs opposite him. Linda, dressed neatly in her school uniform, sat nervously, her fingers twisting the hem of her skirt. Beside her, Bola sat quietly, clutching her worn satchel to her chest, her eyes darting from the floor to Mr. Cole's face. Linda, Mr. Cole began, his voice measured, this is the girl you have been spending time with? Linda swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, sir. She's my friend. Your friend? Mr. Cole leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. Do you know who she really is? Linda's lips trembled. Yes, Daddy. She told me. Her name is Bola, she's not a student here. She only wanted to learn. Bola lowered her head, shame washing over her. For weeks she had managed to hide, slipping in and out of classrooms, holding on to knowledge like it was bread to a starving child. And now the truth stood naked in the room. Mr. Cole studied her for a long moment. Is this true, Bola? Yes, sir, Bola whispered. Her voice was steady but low. I only wanted to learn. I didn't mean any harm. I know I do not belong here, but when I listen, when I write, it feels like my heart is alive. Please, sir, don't be angry with Linda. She only showed me kindness. Linda's eyes brimmed with tears. Daddy, she's brilliant, smarter than most of the students. Please don't punish her. She doesn't deserve it. For a while, silence filled the room, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner. Mr. Cole leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on Bola. He could see the hunger in her eyes, not for food but for knowledge. A fire he knew well, one he had seen in rare children who refused to be beaten down by circumstance. Bola, he finally said, where are your parents? My mother is sick, sir, Bola replied softly. She cannot walk. I take care of her. She hesitated, then added, my father is gone. Mr. Cole pressed his lips together, his expression unreadable. He looked at Linda, then back at Bola. Do you understand what you have done? He asked, his voice firm but not unkind. Sneaking into classrooms, pretending to be a student, deceiving teachers. That is not the way to live. Bola's hands tightened around her satchel. Yes, sir. I know. But I had no other way. I only wanted to learn. If I could, I would sit outside the window for the rest of my life, just to hear the lessons. Mr. Cole's stern face softened, though his voice remained steady. You are bold, Bola. Bold and very foolish. But, he paused, tapping his pen on the desk, there is something about you I cannot ignore. Linda leaned forward, hope flickering in her eyes. Daddy, please. Mr. Cole sighed deeply. He turned his gaze to the window, watching the green school field where children played freely, unaware of the storm in his office. Then he looked back at Bola. You will not sneak into my school again, he said firmly. Bola's heart sank. But before despair could swallow her, he continued, instead, you will come here properly. On one condition. Both girls gasped. What condition, sir? Bola asked quickly, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. That you prove yourself, Mr. Cole said. I will test you myself. If you can show me that your hunger for knowledge is matched by discipline and obedience, I will find a way to make you a student here. If not, he paused, his eyes piercing hers, you will never step into this compound again. Do you understand? Bola nodded vigorously, her eyes shining. Yes, sir. I understand. Linda reached for her hand under the desk and squeezed it. Bola squeezed back, her heart racing with both fear and excitement. For the first time in her life, the door to her dream wasn't closed. It was standing slightly ajar. And Bola was ready to step through. The day Mr. Cole brought Bola into his mansion was the day her life split into two halves, the before and the after. For years, her nights had been spent on the with the constant sound of her mother's muttering filling the darkness. Now she walked into a house so large it felt like another world. Marble floors, chandeliers, polished staircases that seemed to stretch into the sky, everything glistened. She stood frozen at the entrance, clutching her ragged school bag like a shield, her eyes wide as though she had stepped into a dream she dared not believe. Life changed for Bola in ways she could never have imagined. Mr. Cole kept his promise. Within weeks, her mother was admitted to a reputable psychiatric hospital where she received proper treatment. At first, the woman did not even recognize her daughter. Each visit was filled with blank stares and confused mutterings. But Bola never gave up. She would hold her mother's hand, speak softly about the past, and sometimes sing the lullabies her mother used to hum in her clearer days. 3 months later, a miracle happened. On a quiet Saturday morning, Bola walked into the hospital room as usual. She greeted softly, "Mama, it's me, Bola." Her mother looked up slowly, blinking, her lips trembling. Then tears filled her eyes. "Bola," she whispered. "My daughter." The embrace that followed was the warmest Bola had felt in years. For the first time in a long time she did not feel like a lost child. Meanwhile, Mr. Cole's home became hers. She was no longer the girl sneaking by windows or climbing trees to steal knowledge. She was now in a room of her own, with a proper bed, new clothes, and books stacked high on her desk. It felt unreal. But the biggest surprise of all was when Mr. Cole enrolled her in the very same elite school she had once only dared to sneak into, the school where Linda studied. Linda and Bola walked through the gates in the school uniform. "I knew you were meant for more," Linda squealed, her voice filled with excitement. Bola laughed, though tears stung her eyes. "I can't believe it either, but we're here together now." From that day their secret friendship was no longer a secret. They sat together in class, shared meals openly in the cafeteria, and studied late into the evening. Linda, with her natural cheer, helped Bola adjust to her new world, while Bola, with her quiet resilience, inspired Linda to see life differently. Though their backgrounds were worlds apart, their bond only grew stronger. For Bola, it was not just about finally having access to education, but about finally having a friend she could call her own, without fear, without shame. And deep within her, she promised herself that she would make both Mr. Cole and her recovering mother proud.